We will get started in just a couple minutes. Just going to give everyone a chance to join. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September Boston Food Access Council meeting, brought to you, obviously, courtesy of Zoom. We're excited to be giving you all an update this evening on what we've been up to, and also engage everyone here in the room in a really important conversation about what we're going to be up to next. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Lauren Palumbo. I am one of the two co-chairs of the steering committee. And I also, in my day job, work as the Chief Operating Officer at 11 Spoonfuls Food Rescue, a food recovery and distribution program that is based here in Boston. Catherine, would you mind going to the next slide real quick? Thanks. Oh, actually the second one after that. So that we don't waste too much time having everyone sort of unmute and try to introduce themselves, if everyone can take a moment and drop your name, your organization, if you have one, your preferred pronouns in the neighborhood or community that you either work in or live in, into the chat box. I'm about to do it myself. That will allow us to know who is in the room this evening, so to speak. So while you're all doing that, I just want to run through some ground rules so that we can have a successful meeting this evening. Just a note, if you haven't noticed it already, up in the top left corner of your screen, we are recording today's meeting so that we can share it with anyone who is unable to make it and share it publicly. So that we can ensure that sound is clean. If everyone can please keep themselves muted at all times unless called on to speak, please do so. And when you are unmuted, please be mindful of background noise, the best of our ability, though we're all a little out of control on that one. Please use the chat box to submit any questions during the presentations. We will try to leave time at the end of each section for any Q&A. And we will also use the chat feature to share links and or other important information throughout the webinar. And then finally, when we do break out into small breakout groups, please ensure that all voices in the group are heard and that no one is dominating the conversation. So with that, hopefully we've covered some good ground rules for the evening. Catherine, do you mind going to the next slide? Thank you. So everyone, it's been a year. It's been a wild year, but it has been about a year since the transition committee announced the nominating and electing process for this current iteration of the steering committee. It has been about 9 months since we all took our positions here on the steering committee. And as we approach upcoming steering committee elections, which my co-chair Monet will speak about in a few moments, we did just want to take a few minutes and sort of take a look back and just share with everyone what we've been working on, because we do only get to meet quarterly as in these public meetings, but the steering committee is meeting monthly, sometimes twice a month, depending on what's needed. And we wanted to share what's been happening behind the scenes. It has obviously been a challenging year in food access. It has been a challenging year in life in 2020, but on the back end, we have made some important accomplishments that are necessary to ensure that the Food Access Council can be successful going forward. On the very exciting administrative end, we did spend a quite a bit of time early this year working on our bylaws, which were adopted at the March public meeting, our last in-person meeting. We also elected co-chairs, again, myself and Monet Vance. And then we established, as I mentioned, the monthly steering committee meetings that steering committee members are expected to attend and participate in. Following that, we created 4 standing working groups, whom you'll hear from in a little bit about what they have been up to. Those are the fundraising, policy and advocacy, community outreach, education and engagement, and the working group that is dedicated to the mayor's food access agenda. We also elected or appointed interim chairpersons for each of those working groups from the steering committee. Again, we'll get into this a bit later, but I just want to note that those are really interim positions where they still exist. The intent is very much to get members of the broader Boston Food Access Council to participate in those roles and really steer those groups forward into next year. We have created and initiated some communication channels in order to communicate on behalf of the steering committee out to the broader public, including the sort of registered members of the Boston Food Access Council, but also anyone else that might be interested. So we do have a Facebook page, which we'll share the link to later. We also have a Slack channel that can be used to communicate with your fellow BFAC members. That's a really easy way to communicate, quick and simple. And then we created an email platform. So if you have not been seeing our email updates, I would strongly advise that you check your spam folder. A few months ago, with the help of our intern, Anli, who's been working with us this summer, we worked to get an email platform set up so that we've been sending email updates on a monthly basis through the platform MailChimp. Because that's a new platform for you to be receiving emails from us, sometimes that will automatically default to a spam folder. So I would strongly encourage everyone here this evening or anyone watching this to check their spam folder and ensure that they're getting our emails. Through those emails, we are able to share, apologies for the siren, we are able to share links to upcoming meetings, important information, the working group calendar, dates and times and so on. So please do pay close attention to those. We do try to send one every month so that you know what's going on. I mentioned her already, but Anli, who joined us this summer as an intern, has been incredible at helping us put some of these systems in place. And we are also excited to welcome a new intern, Annalise, this fall into that role. And we're looking forward to being able to continue to move that work forward. All of this is to say that our steering committee roles are really important. They may be administrative in nature and certainly do require a time commitment on behalf of all steering committee members and lots of Zoom meetings and fun collaborations on documents. But overall, without these sort of backbones, the Boston Food Access Council would not be able to sort of have a path to move forward. And while we've been working to do all of those things, we're really excited this evening to have these conversations around how do we move forward, and we'll get to more of that later. But as we prepare for this winter's steering committee elections, we just wanted to share a few reminders as to why these roles are important in case any of you are considering running for the seats that will be opening up. So with all of that said, again, happy to answer any questions about what we have been up to. I'm just trying to take a quick look at the chat box to see if anyone has dropped any in. It doesn't look like it yet, but happy to answer any if they do come up. I will say, I'm happy now at least to turn it over to Monet, who is going to speak a bit more about the elections process.
So as Lauren said, my name is Monet Vance. I am the other co-chair for the BFAC Steering Committee. I'm going to be speaking about the Steering Committee elections, and I'm also going to be talking about the seats that are going to be available. We have a 2-year term, as it states in our bylaws. They will happen yearly in December. This position, if you choose to run, will be held from this December until 2022. We currently have 3 organizational seats up for that are for individuals that are stepping down. And then I myself am going to be rerunning for election. So if you are representing an organization or you are a community member looking to participate, feel free to run. Every year we will have 4 to 5 seats that will become available, and this will create a new opportunity for new voices to come to the table. And you can go on to the next slide. So in order to vote in the election, as well as run, you must be a BFAC member, and you also must be a voting member in order to vote and run for a BFAC seat. When it comes to becoming a member, you can sign up using the form there. We will drop the link in the chat if there's anyone that needs the link. And then when it comes to being a voting member, you must have at least attended 2 of the past 4 community meetings or a combination of the working group meetings within the past year. If you are worried you might not be considered a voting member, reach out to Lauren and myself, and we will be, well, actually you don't have to reach out to us. We will be letting everybody know who is considered a voting member, because this year we will be doing elections, with Google Form versus doing it in person. All voting members will receive a link in order to vote. And I don't know if we decided on a time limit that they're going to be. Was it actually a week?
I don't think we've decided yet, but
Okay.
we'll certainly make sure that that's clear when we communicate in December.
Sure. So as Lauren stated, we will disclose, clearly state how long you have to vote, and the rules and everything regarding voting will be in the Google form. You can go on to the next page. All right, so now we're going to get an update from each of our working groups. Fundraising, you guys are up next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Sikander. Paul, are you on the call?
I am, yeah. Sorry about that. I can get us started there.
Sweet, go for it.
Yeah, everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so since the last general body meeting, Claire and I and the rest of our working group members have researched the different ways in which we could begin to accept donations. We learned about the legal steps needed to incorporate as a nonprofit, and we looked into fiscal sponsorship opportunities and explored a path to registering as a 501c3. And ultimately, with the guidance of the steering committee, we've determined that the BFAC is not well enough formed to commit to pursuing legal status at this time, and thus cannot begin direct fundraising activity. Subsequently, the focus of the fundraising working group will shift. It will have to. And so our new objective will be to gather more information so that we can begin to move closer to being ready and able to accept donations. Our new objective will really be to gain a deeper understanding and even perhaps help define the council's purpose and future functions.
Great, thank you, Paul. So then I'll talk about what we will continue to do moving forward. We're going to focus on 3 main initiatives. So the first one is compiling potential donors and funders. This is going to be regular and ongoing. The second one will be to search for pro bono or low-cost accounting and financial services. to help us with the financial reporting that will be required when we start to raise money. This is part of a broader goal of ours to be fully set up with our administrative and operational processes before we incorporate. So later on in the future, we can strictly focus on fundraising. And then our third initiative is to create a specific outline of fundraising needs by connecting with the other working groups and learning about their expected priorities and programs. And then we hope to turn this information into a rough fundraising budget. So for example, if one of the main priorities, or excuse me, if we wanted to raise money to provide free childcare at the general body meetings, once we're back in person, we'd assess the demand for childcare and the associated costs based on local providers' rates. So then going off of this last point, we want to ask the other working groups to keep us in mind as you continue your work and shape your goals. And we really want to hear from you. We will likely reach out to you to learn your priorities so that we can frame our fundraising strategy based on your goals. And then lastly, we would like to welcome everyone to join a fundraising working group meeting. They are once a month. The next one is next Wednesday on the 23rd. And we welcome you whether you have direct experience writing grants, or if you want to come learn about fundraising, or if you want to just share your experience and ideas. We'd love to have you. We are a smaller group, so your voice will be incorporated in our plans. You can reach out to me for the Zoom link. My email is my first name last name @gmail. I hope you can see that in my Zoom tile, but I can also share the Zoom link through the regular BFAC channels. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
And the Zoom link will be shared on Facebook also, so if people want to join that way.
All right, Karibe, you're up.
Thank you, Monet. Hi. So prior to our last meeting, excuse me. So we have been going through the process of electing our chairs and co-chairs. Unfortunately, the two candidates that stepped up to become chairs had to withdraw their candidacy. So we're also in the process of now selecting new chairs. So if you are interested in becoming a chair or co-chair for the policy and advocacy group, please reach out to us. We do have some candidates at the moment, but what we want to do is we want to set up a time to connect with these folks that want to become chairs, just to explain and go over just what it means to become a chair of a group and what the rules and regulations are in regards to that. So please feel free to reach out, and we'll be speaking more of it during the meeting. Thank you.
Joy?
Joy, you're on mute.
Hi there, sorry about that. My name is Joy Gary, and I am the interim chair for the Community Outreach, Engagement, and Education Working Group. And since our last meeting, our working group has met twice, and we were discussing what were the gaps within the food system and coming up with a list to be able to figure out how we can meet those gaps. Some of the initial gaps that we did see that I believe that we reported out on were in the youth homeless community, the Latino community, and the immigrant community, and also within the senior communities. And since then, we were able to partner with the Boston Food and Forest Coalition to gather a list of different organizations that exist in the Boston area to get an understanding of like where all of the food service organizations exist, so that a map can be created. And over the past couple of weeks, we have since, I'm sorry,
Joy, you're
Muted yourself.
we have since began discussions with other organizations about taking on this project and having this project to be housed within another working group, which I believe we're going to discuss further a little bit later and go into details about that. We did meet last night, our working group, and our next steps are to elect new chairs and also go into the details about our goals and get clear on what exactly we're going to do going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joy. And I will be talking about the Mayor's Food Access Agenda. I currently am the interim co-chair for that working group. At the moment, we are in the process of looking for co-chairs. And as Karibe stated, we are going to be hosting a meeting where we discuss what does it mean to be a co-chair and the expected responsibilities that it comes with being a co-chair for a working group. But as Joy mentioned in her group, we are going to be partnering with the community outreach and engagement group so that we can do a food assessment. As she stated, it was something that the community outreach and engagement group wanted to work on. However, it is something that is close to the mayor's agenda. So we are going to be sharing the responsibility on working on that project. We will be in touch as a steering committee as to the next steps for that project. And we will be in search of individuals to assist with the movement of the day-to-day process for this project to get off the ground. You can go to the next slide. Right.
So Monet, can I just jump in for a second? Can we, Catherine, can you just scroll back real quick to the application slide? Because it got skipped by accident.
Sure. Oh, yes.
Monet, you want to run through, sorry, the next slide, Catherine.
Yes, the application slide. It's in between this one and the last one. Or maybe is it after?
It keeps disappearing. Nope, that was it. It's the one that says to run for election. That, yeah. Stop.
All right, so in order to run, to be a part of the steering committee, we are asking that you be a voting member and you submit an application by November 2nd. This application is now available on the OFA website. We do have a link that's out there.
I don't think you don't have to be a voting member in order to run to be a part of the steering committee. I didn't think that was in the bylaws. You have to be a voting member to vote, but anyone could run because of the community votes on the person after they write their bio or submit their application. And then the community votes on the person. But you can't vote unless you've been a part of 2 meetings, either a general meeting or a work group meeting. But anyone could run. They just have to say why they would want to run, and the community has to vote for this person to be, it goes based on votes.
Thank you, Amanique. So the application is going to be due on November 2nd. And if you happen to have any questions on the application, please reach out to Lauren or myself or any of the other steering committee members. On December 2nd, we are going to be reviewing those applications with the broader group, allowing time for the applicants to talk about the reason why they want to run for a steering committee seat. And then we will be providing the link again to those who are able to vote, eligible to vote via email. And then I think we're good to go back to the breakout groups.
Cool, thank you. All right, Catherine, do you mind scrolling ahead a bit? Okay, so, you know, you all just heard sort of what we've been up to, what the working groups have been up to, and where the election process is heading in the next couple of months as we sort of slide into fall and then winter. Now that we have the structure in place, I think we are not alone in sort of recognizing that priorities have certainly shifted as a result of the past year's events. And essentially what we're hoping to do tonight is, through some pretty lengthy breakout groups so that there's plenty of time for everyone to chat, we are hoping to sort of revisit some of the topic areas that we voted on last year at this time. For any of you that were in attendance last fall, there was an exercise where we discussed a handful of categories of sort of topic areas, things like increasing healthy food access, economic development, farmers markets, and so on, where we did a little exercise and sort of voted up the different topic areas that we felt were of highest priority. You'll see those topic areas on the next few slides, sorted in order of the votes that they received. Underneath each of those topic areas are some potential advocacy or action items that the Boston Food Access Council could work on. I want to be clear in stating that these potential advocacy and action items are both items that were suggested by the community in breakout groups last fall, and items that were pulled together through research from the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic, which works with food policy councils across the country. And so some of these things may be items that absolutely did not come up in our meetings, but that other food policy councils have tackled in other places. So just keep that in mind, that the recommendations that you're seeing do not only represent the voice of the Boston community. I'll also sort of just emphasize there that we are a food access council and not a broader food policy council. So I would encourage everyone to sort of keep that in the back of their mind about, you know, what should we be prioritizing? What will the community, you know, most need? How can we be the most impactful group in terms of increasing food access here in the city? All of that said, you know, there was this long list of potential actions, and we kind of want to take a look back through it and revisit it, potentially raise some new ones, and try to determine what issues need to take a front seat right now. Catherine, do you mind going to the next slide? So what we'd like to ask everyone to do, and we're probably going to take about 45 minutes in breakout, so it's going to be pretty lengthy, but we will have 45 minutes for you each to sort of jump into your breakout groups and spend a few minutes going through. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. If you can all open it successfully, that'd be great. But that will basically give you the information that's on the next few slides, since the slides will kind of disappear when we break out into groups. Again, the list that you'll see both on the next few slides and on the document that I just put in the chat, it's not an exhaustive list. There are probably a whole bunch of new ideas that we have learned in the past 6 months about what is possible in the world of food access. But take a look through the list that is provided. And I might need to adjust the sharing, so hold on. I'll fix that before we go in, but take a few minutes at the top of the group and read through those items, and then try to, as a group, to the best of your ability, identify the top 3 to 5 items that you think are the most pressing that the Boston Food Access Council should be tackling in the next, 3 to 6 months. Like, what is urgent and now? And then think about another 3 to 5 things that should be tackled in the sort of midterm. This will help us, as a steering committee, sort of take a look at those priorities and identify which working groups should be working on them. Do we need other working groups to work on those things? How do we direct energy and time and resources to ensure that the items that the community votes on are being addressed? I will also ask that we will be spending 15 minutes after the breakout groups reporting out on what has been discussed. So please do identify someone at the top of your breakout on who's going to do that, because I know not everyone is comfortable presenting in front of a large audience. And then the last thing I would say is, this is an opportunity for you to direct us on what, we should be spending our time and energy on in the months ahead. And that is incredibly important and of strong interest to us as a steering committee as well. Are there any other things that I left out that any other steering committee members would like to weigh in on while I try to go make sure that everyone can actually see the file that we just shared?
Lauren, do you want me to just tick through the items really quickly so people just see which ones they're going to be talking about?
If you wouldn't mind going through by category, that'd be awesome.
Sure.
Thanks.
Hold on one. Okay. So I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. The first one is healthy food access, and you can see these are the general votes up at the top. Back a year ago, food assistance programs, economic development, food waste, urban ag, farmers markets, and discouraging unhealthy foods. And I believe we're going to be sending the link that you're going to get is going to have all of those. So you might want to take a few minutes at the top of the breakout session just to kind of review them yourselves in more detail before you get into discussion.
Can anyone just try clicking on that link now to make sure that it actually opens? It works. Okay, great. Thanks, Nicole. All right, everyone, hold your horses because I'm going to do my best to get you all into breakout groups. There should be at least one member of the steering committee in each breakout. I want to make sure that, a voice from the steering committee is present so that if there are any questions about the process, that we're hopefully here to answer them. So some of the groups are a little bit small, so I might rework them into a few others. So just bear with me for 1 second. All right, everyone. Hopefully everyone had some really great conversations and has lots to share with us about what our priorities should be going forward. I don't know that there's a specific order in which we want to do this. Does anyone want to, whomever was the representative from the first breakout group, I don't know if you all knew which number you were in though. No, people are shaking. No one knows what number they were in. Okay. All right. So anyone want to just sort of jump in and share what their group discussed in terms of top priorities?
Sure. Can we go first?
Go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So in our breakout group, we took a look at the different topics that were listed in the shared drive. And I think the biggest question was in regards to the first bullet on the first topic. It's the healthy food access. We just had a bunch of questions in regards to zoning and what exactly that meant, specifically to this bullet point, right? But we did speak about community programs such as online, SNAP, and EBT. Currently, these online programs are limited to Amazon and Walmart, and it would be fantastic if we can work on extending vendors besides those two giant retailers. We talked about ready-to-eat healthy meals, so having access to not just fresh produces, but also freshly made ready-to-eat meals as well. We spoke about urban agriculture and how can we as a committee and as a council just push an initiative in the city. Again, more questions about zoning incentives, just some clarification in regards to what that means, because it can mean a bunch of things. So we spoke about needing a space to help and advocate and promote the school feeding. So we talked a bit about how USDA extended the SSO programs where parents and kids can get food from school districts and school buildings, but how do we get that word out to the community? We spoke about the use of restaurant space to help and stimulate the economy. I think in the previous previous meeting, we had Commonwealth Kitchen present, present what they have been doing. So, how can we help and spread that idea as well? And also I think I forget what it was called, but someone should remind me. There was a website. I think it's the Food Project. I'll share when I find it. That is the same kind of model, but it's done throughout the entire US. We spoke about needing to communicate, just more clarity and communication between the city councils and also the community-based groups that we have here, and just more clarity. So, we have organizations that have boots on the ground, that know the community, that know the community needs, but how can the city be more in tune with these communities to understand exactly what they need? And lastly, we spoke about what would be the best way to get direct input from communities. I don't think all people have access to internet and all these services. So what are some alternative ways that the community can be engaging the folks that just don't have access to these resources? And someone from the team, yes, came to the rescue. So it's called Project Restore. So we do want folks to take a look at this site. And that's all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Karibe. Does another group want to share what they discussed?
Lauren, I can go for our group. We had, there was a gentleman, David, who was going to present, but he had to jump off, so I'm jumping in. But I think there's some overlap with Karibe's group. But we had a general, as we kind of flowed through our conversation, we kept kind of coming back to the theme of what's different between now and a year ago. And I think it's just identifying things to make us more resilient. So thinking about how food has kind of highlighted, or, this whole crisis has highlighted food and kind of the gaps and weaknesses. And so how can we kind of identify short and long-term goals that kind of address those gaps and weaknesses in our city. So we came up with a couple of focus areas. And the first one was really just a short-term goal in terms of around outreach and awareness and education, not only for residents who need to access benefits, but also for those providers, making sure that the people who are assisting people have all of the information and updated information, because it changes so often. But like Joy gave a great example of, there's a lot of people that are helping, SNAP assistance, but don't always know about HIP. And so just making sure that we know that people really have all of the information about how these benefits can kind of unlock other benefits. So, and I think the other piece to that too is kind of looking at, peeling back the layers of what groups don't have this information, and are there groups, as you said, Karibe, like boots on the ground groups that know their communities that can help bridge the gap and are trusted resources. And is that an area that we can kind of focus on? Another area was around just data collection, and we had this whole conversation about food hubs and linking resources. And so there's so many different groups out there, and are we maximizing all of each strengths of each group? And so another example was, there's a lot of churches that are doing other things, but they have these kitchens and we're not utilizing them. I think the same thing we came up with, we were talking about restaurants at the very end of our conversation. Are there things and connections and linking different resources together? And then and then kind of doing like an assessment. I think that we'll talk a little bit more about that later in this meeting, but I think that that's definitely an area in terms of identifying long-term goals. We need to kind of figure out where those gaps are and where, you know, there are potential connections. And then the last one was around urban ag as well. We talked a little bit about how this crisis has kind of highlighted, you know, our reliance on kind of this global or national food system, and how, you know, are there funding opportunities that could be accessed right now so that we can kind of build that foundation for the long term. And please jump in, my other team members, if I've missed anything or misrepresented anything. I think that covers most of the things that we talked about. Great.
Cool. Diane, you look like you're right. You're on mute though. Unmute yourself. There you go. Okay.
Okay, thanks. And thanks for those who participated in our discussion. Yeah, piggybacking Caribe, Catherine, much of what you all have said, particularly sort of how this looks so different right now, you know, just having the conversation a year ago, we talked about that. And really, you know, that right now at the moment, you know, it's all hands on deck around food access, right? And of course, I think we all prefer healthy food access over any other kind of food access, but really, what really stood out to me was, and again, my appreciation to the council and the steering committee for being intentional about really using this space and wanting to create this safe space for the community, like really using this council to highlight the voices of the community, right? You know, each organization we know has its own agenda, its own priorities, and allowing this space to really, in supporting the community and using its voice as leverage, in sort of walking forward what the priorities are of this council and ultimately the city, the state, and hopefully the federal government. But really particularly acknowledging that the first two top sort of identified priorities of this group, healthy food access and food assistance programs, could really go under the same umbrella. And I would actually argue that all of them could go under that healthy food access. And I think at the moment, what is so scary to most and what was so immediate to most is losing access to food, whether it was not having the resources or the grocery store shelves were empty. So thinking about ways that we as a council can weigh in on healthy food access, and right now, of course, in the moment, is advocating with the federal government. So there was some strong feelings that we should, as a council, lift up the voices of those in the community to advocate with the federal government, particularly, but also the state and local governments, again, ensuring that the community's voice is making it to those spaces. A lot of talk around access and really identifying and the importance of identifying who's falling through the cracks. Particularly, we talked about Boston public school students and the barriers that are faced right now if parents are having to leave the home to go pick up school at a meal site, and what that means, particularly seniors, disabled, those that are at risk of coronavirus. And equally important, our immigration community and what's happening within the immigrant communities in terms of whether it's real or perceived fear around what access to program, what the potential consequences could be. And again, we did touch a little bit upon urban ag, you know, identifying, yes, we do import a lot of our food, but so many people right now, you know, have sort of took this summer to sort of learn their green thumbs and, you know, and let's, you know, see what's possible in our own communities in terms of being able to feed ourselves. So yeah, that's it. I think also in terms of advocacy, we did touch upon, you know, when we think about the Boston delegation in DC being very supportive, you know, how do we support them in getting our voices heard down there? But then how do we think about, you know, maybe connecting with other, whether it's food policy groups across the state or across the country, how could we potentially be a more sort of collective voice so that, you know, maybe there's some Republican senator from the Midwest that, you know, somehow learns the value of the, you know, voices coming from Boston and how that's important to them there. You know, and interestingly, I'll land on this, and the importance of advocating with the federal government is what happens and what's happening now in this election season when states like us that don't necessarily support who's doling out the money, we don't get the money, you know, and what does that mean for us as a community in where we have to sort of fill in these gaps. So I just want to come back to what I will likely always in my work come back to, centering the work of this council around the real experiences of people with lived experience and making sure that they have a welcome and safe seat at the table. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Claire, you were the representative from the group that I jumped into. Would you like to share what we talked about?
Yeah, thank you. I turn my camera off. I have unstable internet, and I'm gonna try to talk fast. So yeah, we approach these topic areas and goals through the lens of the pandemic to find what is the most pressing issues and what issues have been exacerbated by COVID-19. You know, we mentioned, like other groups, how Massachusetts has the highest rate of unemployment, the highest food cost in the country, and 1 in 5 children are in households experiencing food insecurity. And then from that conversation, we came up with specific immediate priorities, and those are focused advocacy to lobby the USDA to extend emergency food services to children until the end of the year. Another one is using food assistance to help people make their own choices, as in funding SNAP enrollment and other existing programs, and maybe even creating and funding new programs to lower the cost of food and increase the accessibility. And then we also talked about urban agriculture, and that we would like to encourage the city to come up with clear, quantifiable goals, as in the number of farms, the number of community gardens, and the number of acres for urban agriculture, for example. Those were our shorter term goals. Our long-term goals are to focus on economic development, as in how do we rebuild our local food economy long-term. And then we'd also love to pressure the city to quantify its food access goals, going back to our specific goal or immediate goal on urban agriculture. And we'd like to focus on linking food producers to food access centers in Boston. We feel like there is a disconnect. Along with what the other representatives have said, we'd like to grow the BFAC membership and bring more voices into the conversation. And then we want to advocate for the dedicated grant loan fund. This was pretty much a direct bullet point on the healthy food access. So advocate for this loan fund that would be available to small businesses connected to food access. And we feel this is especially important as we build back from this pandemic. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Monique, you're unmuted, so go ahead.
We talked about direct to consumer care when it comes to food access and healthy food. We specifically looked at a recommendation that said, and we talked about it for a while, develop a model for the city to partner with private companies to encourage direct to consumer distribution. And we talked a lot about the environmental impact and about connecting farmers direct with consumers and restaurant owners. And, you know, we talked a lot about research and equity, tracking where the money is going, funding and making sure there's support for farmers, and tracking. We talked a lot about urban gardens, and we talked a lot about empty lots. We talked a lot about what these urban gardens do, and we want to track what these urban farms do, because we know they provide, or they make money, they provide to these businesses. But how are they, like, who we want to track ownership of land, ownership of businesses. We're looking at a whole equity standpoint. So ownership of land, ownership of businesses, empty lots, wasted food between universities and hospitals, and how we could a la carte that food to the people right away. We talked about hot meals. We talked about policy on when working on EBT, specifically allowing it to be provided for be used for hot meals, and also maybe having it flex, different wages, different incomes for different people, because it's not even enough for individuals or families. And then if people have certain allergies and have to eat a certain way, it's not like you get a bonus amount of food. We talked about zoning, but a lot about research and the environment and tracking where our food comes from, where the waste is going, and leaving. We talked a lot about the people and the workers, and how often when things are city-led, it leaves out, or even when money comes in, initiatives comes in, and it's supposed to target the minorities, it leaves out the Black community and the Latinx community. We also talked about how that leaves out the immigrant community, who are the working community. The Black community and the working immigrant community are the farmers, and are the food industry that's often left out. So we talked about all those things in the assessment, and like how just we could be equitable and transparent in all ways, and provide food for all people, and watching our waste and watching where our food is coming from. So yeah. And if anyone wants to say anything in my group.
Okay. Monet, I think your group is the only one that hasn't gone. I don't know if it was you or someone else that was going to report out, but.
Yeah, I took the notes, so I can do a little report. So we went through just the current ideas, and we're kind of looking at them through what seems like the best idea of the ones that were already created during this time. So as many other groups have said, we really were focused mostly on food assistance, and of course trying to make that healthy food assistance. And then we also thought that economic development was a relatively high priority, just in pairing it with food assistance currently, and making sure that the way that we recover from COVID is resilient and allows for better food security in the future. So just a couple of the ideas that we highlighted as seeming especially important right now. We're trying to edit the zoning permit process so that mobile food is more possible in different areas where food is a little bit less accessible, making sure there's funding and more of that economic development into places that currently sell healthy food, or that could transition into selling more healthy food. And we actually had an interesting statistic that we started with, which is that at the beginning of COVID, apparently about 50% of people were previously getting all of their food from the grocery store, and about 50% were mostly getting their food from restaurants. So when restaurants closed, that led to a large decrease in the food available at grocery stores. So I thought that was very interesting. That was something I had not heard specifically. And so that's another reason why we were really focused on just making sure that food is actually readily available in all places, encouraging SNAP sign-up drives, and ways to advertise other benefits of being on SNAP. Especially important to have the pre-made meals, as other groups have said, for people who are homeless or food or housing insecure. And just the advocating for mindful community development. So I think that we put as mid priorities farmers markets and urban agriculture as potential ways that can kind of be both food access increasing and potentially economic development increasing, but that would be more specific to different localities. So those were more of a mid priority. So I think that covers what we discussed.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Catherine, who's going to run through some action items for everyone here and our next steps as a broader council.
Thank you, Lauren. And I just threw a couple things into the chat, and I'm going to explain some of them while I go through this presentation. So we kind of wanted to leave and end this month's meeting with some action, and it's timely because this month is actually September is Hunger Action Month. May or may not know that, but last Friday or Thursday was actually Hunger Action Day in the city, and the mayor had put out a proclamation. A number of monuments or landmarks in the city went orange to raise awareness, and I am trying to open up the document that I'm trying to present, and I'm having a little bit
I can try to do it on my end.
I think.
Let's see. Here. Bear with us, everybody.
But I think I do have it.
You got it? Good. Cool. There you go.
Okay. All right, so Hunger Action Month, thank you. So this is an initiative that really is driven by Feeding America, but it's gotten a lot of coverage. I think for all of us to keep in mind, it's a timely month, especially this year, to just leverage everything that we're talking about around food access and take advantage of, and joining as one voice around this issue. I'm just gonna tick through a really quick presentation. We'll send it out via email, but really it's just a call to action. And basically what we're saying is every action counts. It's usually happens in September. It's a nationwide awareness campaign designed to mobilize the public to take action on the issue of hunger. As I mentioned, Hunger Action Day was last Thursday, and the Greater Boston Food Bank has initiated this campaign, but actually we've worked really closely with our other food banks across the state, and also Project Bread and some others. I know Mass Law Reform Institute has pushed out some of these messaging, and something that we kind of all worked together on was to figure out some just themes and messages each week and what we could be pushing out. And that's kind of on this next page. We really focused on back to school, although I know a lot of people are talking about that this week and people are going back to school kind of all month long. Obviously with Labor Day, there was a lot of conversation and a lot of news around Labor Day and what that meant for so many that are unemployed right now. And then I think just fast forward looking to next week, I think actually there's a really great opportunity for all of us to engage in this. We kind of lightly touched on this in our breakout group, but kind of pushing the voter registration and getting out the vote. And so next Tuesday, if you were not aware, it's National Voter Registration Day. I put in the link a website that you can sign up to participate, to get out the word. I think it's something like a really easy action that each of us could take, and really just at least take one action, make a phone call, post on social media, share with your networks, and just make sure that people are aware and registered. Because that vote, as I think has been mentioned several times throughout this meeting, I think Diane, you really eloquently mentioned it, is how important the people we put into office are to the programs that really impact us at the very end of the day. So voter registration, and then another push that we also talked about that is kind of winding down, but still emphasize a big push on census. I know that that's something we talked about at the last meeting, so just really pushing the census participation. And just, I think, is just a good opportunity to participate. I'm just going to tick through the rest of this, but basically, advocacy, there's a lot of advocacy. I put into the chat a link to the FRAC advocacy COVID page. If you are not aware, Food Resource Action Center, they have a great pulse on what's going on in Congress. They're really pushing. Today actually was a day of action, and I also put in a phone number that and what people are being asked to call their senators and ask them to push and prioritize getting a stimulus package passed now and prioritizing nutrition programs. So advocacy is an obvious one way to participate. Sharing on social media, raising awareness, volunteering, I think that's something we haven't really talked about as a BFAC is, you know, how can we help volunteer? There's a lot of organizations across the city that looking for volunteers. So maybe that's something we could talk about in the future. And then just raising awareness in general. So just wanted to leave you all with that call to action and just the invitation to do something after this meeting, whatever it is. We've given a couple of ideas.
Thanks, Catherine. And then just what you can see here on the rest of the slide, I'll drop the links into the chat box again. One being the joining our Facebook group, the next being join the Slack workspace. Make sure you're receiving our emails. And I'll just add a quick note about this fourth link here. If any of you are familiar with the Massachusetts Local Food Action Plan that was put together a number of years ago, the Massachusetts Food Systems Collaborative is a nonprofit that is sort of tasked with trying to shepherd that plan forward. And they, sort of similar to the breakout conversations that we had this evening, they have had a number of conversations around the state over the past few months to try and understand, again, which things need to be reprioritized under, you know, the current times and the sort of space that we're in. And so this document here that they asked us to share with the council under Massachusetts Local Food System Priorities is a long list of the many, many recommendations that they heard in those conversations, and then a link to a Google form where you can sort of vote up similarly to tonight some of those recommendations. I will caution everyone, it is a very lengthy document. They obviously had many conversations and they received, I think, something like 300 different recommendations. So just be aware that it's not, and you know, it's something that you can do if you have the time and if you you know, want to make sure that your voice is shared in that conversation. But certainly it's not an expectation that everyone participate, and we just want to sort of put the disclaimer out there that it is a pretty robust document to read through. But those links are in the chat. Other than that, we'll just remind everyone that our next public meeting, which is when the elections, sort of when the folks running for steering committee will have a chance to present to the broader council before voting happens. That'll be on Wednesday, December 2nd, again, 6 to 8 p.m. and obviously will be a Zoom meeting. We have the first meeting date for next year, which would be March 3rd. There's a theme here. We're usually the first Wednesday of the month, and it's in March, June, September, and December. We'll worry about locations on that one next year, but probably safe to assume it'll be Zoom there as well. I will say the last thing I'll sort of oh yes, Catherine just added a quick note in the chat box. If you have not yet, please sign in. Again, I think it kind of came up in conversation earlier, but the only way that we know how many meetings you've attended to ensure that you're a voting member is by, you know, making sure that you've signed in for those meetings, and we have to do that electronically now. So if you have not yet, please make sure that you do. And last thing I'll just say is that, you know, we'll definitely take the notes from the conversation tonight. If you want to email them to us from the breakouts, please feel free to do that. And again, our email is bostonfoodaccesscouncil@gmail.com. And then we as a steering committee can sort of compile the top priorities and try to see which ones sort of had the most votes, if you will, behind them, so that we can understand what our priorities need to be going forward. And we thank you for sharing your voices tonight and contributing to that conversation. And I think that's kind of everything. So any last questions in this last couple of minutes before we sign off? Happy to answer anything else that might be on people's minds.
Lauren,
do you post these slides onto, sorry, we both came off mute, whoever else.
Okay.
Sorry, Diane. Do you guys post these slides, or how can we get access to the slides with info?
So we'll share them in an email update probably next week,
Okay.
if not sooner. And that'll include any dates that we have as well on next working group meetings, and hopefully a link to the recording as well.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Lauren. Very important question. I just want to, remind folks, first, if you're considering running for the steering committee and this is your first meeting, plug into the working group so you can get your second meeting under your belt and be eligible. And I just really want to remind folks, sort of the exercise that we did here tonight, and really honing in on these priorities and where they live and where they breathe. Is really in these working groups. So I just really want to plug the working groups. You all, you're so meaningful to this council itself. And as we move forward as a body, I just want us, we come together 4 times a year, and this is an important time to come together. The meat of the work, pun intended, is really, in the working groups. And we just really want to, again, I'm stepping away from my position on the steering committee, certainly not the council, but I'm really looking forward to getting my energy into these working groups. So I just wanted to really put that plug in. If you have any questions, reach out to any of us, hit us up on Facebook, on Slack, but we really appreciate you all being here and the energy that you bring. And we look forward to sort of regrouping and getting this next year's council up and running and marching forward with the priorities that collectively we've all come up with together.
Thanks, Diane. That was very well said. Cool. Well, if no one else has any other questions, I think we can leave it there and maybe actually end on time. So thank you everyone for your time this evening, for the energy that you brought to this conversation, and stay well.
Thank you.